Whew. It's been a minute. I actually don't have elaborate intro today or anything else today. We're just gotta talk, so you know.
I'm a man up on a mission.
So, here we are. We haven't spoken in a bit, so as you may have seen last week, instead of doing this, instead what we did is we decided to go ahead and launch a new YouTube series. I hope you've watched it. It's called T.Built. And it's going to deal and cover and interview a bunch of artists around Toronto. I have a few more, not necessarily lined up, but I'm in contact with a few more to do them. So hopefully we're going to roll it out. The goal is to do 1 or 2 per month, depending on people's availability and everything else. So we're actually up ahead and doing that. The next thing we did last week is we, personally, me and a friend of mine, we're also working together on the videography business. We've done some filming for Canadian Film Festival. So it was actually our first gig as a video production company together. We did that, and I was also doing work for another client for some work that you will see later on, hopefully in the show, with the permission from the client, obviously, to do it. So that's kind of like, got a few clients in this kind of part of this tale of moving on up, which was initially the purpose of this vlog. So, that's a quick update for that. So today what I wanted to talk about, outside of, just updating you on how that's going, is if you need video, obviously, I'm your man. But B is your initial camera settings for shooting video when you get your first camera. Now, I only have the Sony a6500, so I can only speak to that. You can figure it out on your own, whatever camera you have. But what I do is the camera has 2 settings for me, 2 save settings, so I save both my video settings to that. And the camera shoots in 4K. So in 4K, I shoot obviously 4K, 23 frames per second, and I set the shutter speed to 1/50th. So basically, what you want to do is you have your shutter speed. You look at your frame rate and you double that, and then you extrapolate that number to your shutter speed for video. And that's my number 1 setting. Then I tweak the ISO on the go. Sometimes I do auto because there's a change of lighting, but most of the time I'll try to tweak it, and then I have my own color profile. The second part that I do is I shoot for slow motion, it's 120 frames per second. It's not 4K, it's 1080p, and obviously 1/250th. So double up, 120, whatever the closest is. And for that, I do that for slow motion because then in post-production, you can go ahead, take the 120, change the footage to 30 frames per second, have it interpreted as 30 frames per second, and you get smooth and nice slow motion. I can't do that. I don't know why I just did the hand motion because I'm actually shooting in 4K, so obviously I can't do that. But if you imagine it, it looks something like this. Anyways, so those are the settings that I do for my camera. Then obviously there's tweaks up and down, wherever you want to shoot at. But that's what I would recommend if you're using the A6500. That's what would be it. Obviously, you have your own color profiles that you want to go in and mess around with. But the most important thing to understand with a camera is obviously the way it interprets light and the way it takes in light. So there's 3 things that affect that. There is going to be your ISO, and then there is going to be your aperture, and then there's going to be obviously your shutter speed. And they all affect the way how much light the camera lets in. So the numbers are generally well represented. The higher the ISO, the more light the camera lets in. The grainier the footage is sometimes. I shoot roughly, I try not to go over 6,000 if I have this decent lighting, 6,400, and then, I can push it as far as I need to depending on the light, but the higher you go, the grainier it is. And then there's your aperture, because obviously that depends on how wide the camera's open, and the lower that number is, the higher the aperture, the lower the number, the more light it lets in. So, it also affects focus though. So it affects your depth of field. So the higher the aperture, the more kind of you get the range as well. So that will affect your depth of field. So you can adjust that. And then third one is the shutter speed, which is how quickly the camera, the shutter works in the lens itself. And so when it does that, it kind of just also regulates how much light comes in. Obviously, that's not adjustable on the camera when I shoot video because I want it at a specific speed for shooting video, but I do keep it at a I change it for photos, in particular, depending on what photos I use, and then I adjust the ISO and the aperture depending on what it is for light. So those are kind of your basic settings when you pick up a camera and shoot. I recommend having 2 presets because you can skip between 1 and 2 really quickly. You have one for 4K, you have one for slow motion, you kind of on the go, you figure out where you go. Do keep in mind that your slow motion, you're going to have a different ISO because your shutter speed is going to be different, obviously. So it's going to be inherently originally darker at the same, if you have them at the same settings across the board, they're going to be originally darker in slow motion, so you're going to have to adjust the ISO and you might have to adjust the aperture a bit if you want them to match the lighting, or you set your ISO to auto and then it will do that for you. Anyways, I have them on 2 settings. I flip between 2 when I shoot video, and then my third one is my manual setting for my camera when I do photography. And that's it. That's pretty much it. That should explain most of it. Obviously, I'm not doing it in the most professional way, but I'm also not talking about as much about photography because once you start talking about photography, you can adjust all 3 settings, use the light meter in your camera, obviously still use that for video, but that's kind of how it works. And, you know, see you guys next week. We got something special planned.